Hello, everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell with news and views from the Nefarium on Thursday, October 31st, All Hallows Eve, 2024. And I wish it was worthy of something connected with the eve of the Feast of All Saints, but this one belongs truly on Halloween in the secular sense. We're going to be talking today about an article that our colleague and friend Catherine Austin Fitz emailed, and I'm imagining she's already posted it on her website. This one leaves me breathless, but breathless because it confirms a hypothesis that I've had for a very long time, and it confirms it in a rather in-your-face sort of way. And it's actually an article that appeared on Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s website, Children's Health Defense. So we're kind of doing a double whammy here with this. Please remember that that is the source carrying this article. The article is by Dr. Brenda Belletti, and the article is titled Global Threats, Big Red Flag. Gates Foundation gets, listen to this, diplomatic immunity in Kenya. And as you all know, here at this website, we lovingly like to refer to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as the Bill and Medusa Gates Foundation, and it is certainly a nickname that they've earned deservedly. I want to start reading several paragraphs from this article, including the following subtitle at the very beginning. Quote, under the new status, the Bill and Medusa Gates Foundation and its employees are exempt from legal action for acts performed in Kenya as part of their official foundation duties. Will the move set a precedent for other billionaire philanthropists? Let me stop right there. The precedent has already been set, and the precedent is as old as the Middle Ages and the so-called military orders like the Knights Templar or the Knights Hospitaller, which morphed into, here it comes folks, the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. Those crusading orders had two advantages. By dint of their special charter, they were able to own property and accumulate wealth intergenerationally, and they were free from the jurisdiction of any of the nations in which they operated. In other words, they had a kind of international charter or diplomatic recognition from the papacy itself. So in other words, the precedent is already set. So here we go with the article, and I want you again to listen very carefully to the opening paragraph. Quote, Kenya last week granted diplomatic immunity to the Bill and Medusa Gates Foundation and its employees, or servants, Tim Schwab reported on Substack. Now let me stop right there once again. What this article needs to make clear, and it doesn't, is where this language of servants is coming from and why it's there. If this is a grant of sovereign diplomatic immunity, in other words, a recognition on the part of the government of Kenya that the Bill and Medusa Gates Foundation has sovereign status, it would be akin to recognizing that foundation as a sovereign nation. And again, we've seen this sort of thing before with so-called private entities. Think of the Bank of International Settlements. But now, employees of one such entity that's being granted this special privilege, or status, I should say, is having its employees referred to as servants. So in other words, is this recognition also extending or granting a tacit recognition to a kind of chattel slavery status to the employees of the Bail Medusa Gates Foundation? That, to me, is a huge question lurking behind this language. But anyway, to continue. Quote, others worry the decision to grant immunity may set a precedent for other billionaire philanthropists. Concerns have also arisen that other nations will be pressured to follow Kenya's lead and offer immunity to the Gates Foundation in exchange for continued access to the massive resources the foundation pours into other African countries. The government of Kenya's announcement, Schwab wrote, comes a week after farmer organizations and religious leaders across the continent called for reparations, here it is, for the damage the foundation has inflicted on African agriculture through its so-called Green Revolution program. They say the foundation promotes corporate industrial agriculture at the expense of local practices and African ecosystems. Much of the Gates Foundation investment in African agriculture happens through the Nairobi-based AGRA, previously known as the Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa. The foundation is AGRA's co-founder and biggest donor. So in other words, the foundation has rolled out yet another foundation. It has given at least $872 million to the organizations, Schwab reported. So let's stop right there. Does that grant of immunity, diplomatic immunity, therefore extend to the Gates Foundation's interest or role in AGRA? And on we could go. AGRA says it, quote, exists to fulfill a vision where Africa can feed itself, unquote, yet it directs funding to support input-intensive and resource-intensive agriculture. The foundation has past financial ties to companies like Monsanto, now Bayer, whose seeds it pushed on African farmers. In other words, they're trying to corporatize and take over African agriculture. And indeed, listen to this, quote, Daniel Mayengi, coordinator for the Kenya Food Rights Alliance, told Schwab that with Gates's diplomatic immunity, quote, Kenya becomes the testing ground. That is a big, big concern. It's a big red flag. In terms of food sovereignty, as we give Gates these privileges and immunities, Africa is going to be not food sovereign, not seed sovereign, pardon me, we're going to be slaves and masters of big corporations, unquote. And that is precisely, I think, the game that's going on here. And you'll note it's being done under a grant or a recognition of sovereign status. Now, skipping just a bit more, Gates's massive investment in Africa extends beyond agriculture into public health and more recently digital IDs in Kenya. It also includes the Target Malaria Project, which proposed to end malaria by introducing genetically modified or GMO mosquitoes. Critics say the program is based on flawed ecological thinking. Yeah, you think? And backed by the same agribusiness interests that have devastated our agroecological farming systems. And let's not forget, as the article points out in some of its final paragraphs, that the Gates Foundation invested heavily in the so-called mRNA injections during the COVID pandemic. And a final question, right at the final paragraph in this article, quote, Dr. Mumbi Saraki, host of a popular YouTube show, asked on X, quote, if they meant us well, would they need immunity? It looks like we're being sold to the highest bidder, unquote, she added. And I have to concur, and we need to ask the same question about the immunity status that the big pharma companies have had in this country since the 1980s, I believe it was. If they meant us well, would they need this immunity? Well, answer, no. They wouldn't. Now, my problem here is with the galloping mercantilism, the idea that you can have non-state sovereign actors. And of course, we've seen quite a few on the world stage in the last century. The Bank of International Settlements that I've already mentioned, Sovereign Military Order of Malta, and so on. And what this does, you'll note, is it sets up yet another paradigm, and that's that of the dual citizen. Because in a certain sense, if you set up a sovereign immunity inside your own borders, like they've just done with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, then what does that make the employees, or as the article terms them, the servants of that foundation? What's their status? Well, are they chattel slaves of that foundation against whom you cannot move because they have the sovereign immunity protection of the owner or of the employer? So all sorts of thorny issues are being raised with this. And the dual citizenship issue, I think I raised that in connection with this because this is a problem we're going to have to address in this country. I truly believe it's one of the most significant problems that we have. We should not allow anyone to be a holder of any office of government if they're holding a dual citizenship. Your loyalty is either here or there. And if you think it's okay to have dual citizenships, ask yourself this question. Why would we tolerate dual citizenships in certain cases, and one in particular that springs to mind? Would we be willing to grant dual citizenship, let us say, if there was a Muslim caliphate? Would we be willing to grant dual citizenship to members of the Islamic Republic of Iran? So the question is that of divided loyalty. But make no mistake, these foundations have had their own quest for sovereign immunities for a long time. Templars and Sovereign Military Order of Malta. And again, that's a dual citizenship, folks. What are Americans doing holding diplomatic passports from the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, which again, folks, is a sovereignty, and it's directly under the obedience of the papacy. So there's lots going on here with the Bill and Medusa Gates Foundation, and I hope this will spur people to acknowledge, first of all, the fact that there are non-state, non-territorial sovereign actors on the world stage, and the last thing we need to be doing is creating more of them. We need to vest sovereignty where it's always been. And let's be frank and acknowledge the other fact that many of the colonial corporations, the Dutch East India Company, the French East India Company, the British East India Company, these were also sovereign corporate entities, oftentimes with their own military. Just look at the British East India Company. These were private corporations with their own military acting in as front-loaded or fronts for the empires that they were building. So in other words, you can also look at this as yet another colonialization of the African continent, and yet another extension of the same old corporate colonial principle with regard to that continent and its populations. So lots going on here, folks. Like I said, the Nefarium is once again busy, and especially on this All Hallows Eve day or Halloween. The only thing they're lacking here in this case is the costume of ghouls. So that's it for today's news and views from the Nefarium. Thank you to Catherine Austin Fitz for bringing this little hot potato to our attention. We'll see everybody on the flip side. Bye-bye, and God bless.